Now, one of the first things Moses does after he leaves the castle or the palace or whatever it is where he lives, where he spends most of his life and doesn't really see much of the outside world, is witness a soldier of his father being cruel to a slave of the Israelites. And what does he do? He looks around and he kills the soldier. And then he buries the soldier in the sand. And realizing that if there's people, he looked around to see if there was anybody there, but obviously the guy that was being beaten on was there, so at least one person was there. And there was a good chance that there were many people there, and there was also a very good chance that it was a calculated action to get the trust slowly of the slaves who actually outnumbered his father's army, who he intended to rise up against. He was very upset with his father, very upset with the situation, and he saw an opportunity, because there was a clear opportunity in the number of the slaves. So Moses decides to go away, and he goes away and he comes to a land that is not his land, and he happens to be sitting beside a well, and along comes some women, and they want to water their goats or whatever they have there. There's a bunch of other bullying men, because men were always bullies to women. They probably even raped them quite a bit, and we'll get to that about kings. And Moses said, no, don't be an ass, let the women have their water, they have a right to it like everyone else. So he's being demonstrative again, and he helps the women get the water out of the well and water their animals. And the women go back to Papa. What was his name? Papa, I forgot his name, doesn't matter, we'll get to it eventually. But anyhow, the women go back and tell her, and he says, well, how do you get done so fast? And they say, okay, listen to this, quote 19, and this is some obvious evidence for us, and we like to ignore it. An Egyptian rescued us. Okay, an Egyptian rescued us. Hold that in your thoughts for a minute, and keep working on the idea that our character Moses was fuming mad because of who he was. And who he was more, you could say, what he was. And if we want to get serious about this book, we should get serious about the characters, because the story is not true. The story is simply impossible. But the story is based on characters, and characters are what we are. We are always have some kind of a character that we act out towards the world. When we're young, we learn certain characters are better than other characters. We smile when we get our candy. If we pout, we go and scream and kick around. Of course, we end up being sent to our room, that sort of thing. We don't get to watch TV. Well, I didn't want to watch TV, so I get to be a bit more of a shit disturber than most kids. I was a good kid, however, up until I was a teenager. And even then, I think it was pretty good. Anyhow, what matters is Moses did his thing with the girls at the well. Not so much different than how Isaac's servant had done it. He went to the well and picked up Rebecca and went back and took them back, or something like that, whoever she was. No, it wasn't Rebecca. Rebecca was, well, who cares? We'll get to that some other day. What matters is he went for a visit to this place. They invited him to stay, to live there. And the man, the father, gave Zipporah, his daughter, to Moses. And then they had sex, and then out came a child. And they called this child Gershom. And Gershom means, I have been a stranger in a foreign land. And we'll get back to this eventually, but first we'll see what else I missed on this page. Okay, let's talk quickly about this concept of sacrificing the first child. It's mentioned a few times that Molech was one of the gods before them, which meant dictator. God means dictator almost always. And the god Molech supposedly demanded human sacrifice. I somehow think this is overdone because it doesn't make any sense. It would make much more sense to make the slaves or the followers into soldiers than it would be just to simply kill them. There is it's too backwards. It wouldn't work because it would discourage people from wanting to have the first child, and it's just not sensible. The most likely concept of the whole thing is that the king wanted to have the first child, which meant the king wanted to put his penis into the vagina of the virgin girl. And that's part of the reason virginity was so important, is because the kings wanted it, and the religions of the time sold this concept so that people would understand it better, and then that there is your human sacrifice. It is not the death of a child, it is the sperm of the king. And if you don't believe this, that's alright, don't worry about it. Just think about it, just get the picture, read other history books, and you will see that kings were very much like our famous lion that roams the jungle. They wanted, and they would kill, and we can see this with David. He killed Saul and his family, and he's not the only one. Read it in Shakespeare, read it anywhere. The kings kill the family that's there so that they can put their sperm into whichever women they choose, so that their descendants will be the descendants. And this is part of our innate, inherent need to propagate our own genes, because we think our genes are the best. And it's more than likely that there isn't a human being on this planet that doesn't have at least one person who has called himself king in his ancestry. I don't think it's possible that anyone is not a child of a king.